Acts chapter 7, Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit. Here is a fairly lengthy sermon by the church's first martyr, Stephen, and it may seem out of place, but pay close attention to his comparison to himself and the religious leaders and religion scholars that he's speaking to, and the reveals that he describes, and how God's people have brothers and members who have disagreements and the tension between them, and how God's chosen are kind of revealed out of this group of chosen. Then the chief priest said, "What do you have to say for yourself?" Stephen replied, "Friends, fathers, and brothers, the God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was still in Mesopotamia, before the move to Haran, and told him, 'Leave the country of the Chaldeans and move to Haran.' After the death of his father, he immigrated to this country where you now live. But God gave him nothing, not so much as a foothold. He did promise to give the country to him and his son later on, even when Abraham had no son at the time. God let him know that his offspring would move to an alien country where they would be enslaved and brutalized for 400 years. But God said, 'I will step in and take care of those slaveholders and bring my people out so they can worship me in this place.' Then he made a covenant with him and signed it in Abraham's flesh by circumcision. When Abraham had his son Isaac, within 8 days, he produced the sign of circumcision on him, which I assume Stephen would have also had. Isaac became father of Jacob, and Jacob father of 12 fathers, each faithfully passing on the covenant sign. But then those fathers, burning up with jealousy, sent Joseph, one of them, off to Egypt as a slave. God was right there with him, though. He not only rescued Joseph from all his troubles, but brought him to the attention of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He was so impressed with Joseph that he put him in charge of the whole country, including his own personal affairs. Later, a famine descended on that entire region, stretching from Egypt to Canaan, bringing terrific hardship. Our hungry fathers looked high and low for food, but the cupboard was bare. Jacob heard there was food in Egypt and sent our fathers to scout it out. Having confirmed the report, they went back to Egypt a second time to get food. On that visit, Joseph, one of the fathers, revealed his true identity to his brothers and introduced the Jacob family to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent for his father Jacob and everyone else in the family, 75 in all. That's how the Jacob family got to Egypt. Jacob died, and our fathers with him. They were taken to Shechem and buried in the tomb for which Abraham paid a good price to the sons of Hamor. When the 400 years were nearly up, the time God promised Abraham for deliverance, the population of our people in Egypt had become very large, and there was now a king over Egypt who had never heard of Joseph. He exploited our race mercilessly. He went so far as to forcing us to abandon our newborn infants, exposing them to the elements to die a cruel death. In just such a time, Moses was born, a most beautiful baby. He was hidden at home for 3 months, where he could be hidden no longer. When he could be hidden no longer, he was put outside and immediately rescued by Pharaoh's daughter, who mothered him as her own son. Moses was educated in the best schools in Egypt. He was equally impressive as a thinker and an athlete. When he was 40 years old, Moses wondered how everything was going with his Hebrew kin and went to look things over. He saw an Egyptian abusing one of them and stepped in, avenging his underdog brother by knocking the Egyptian flat. He thought his brothers would be glad that he was on their side, and even see him as an instrument of God to deliver them. But they didn't see it that way. The next day, two of them were fighting, and he tried to break it up, told them to shake hands and get along with each other. Friends, you are brothers. Why are you beating up on each other? The one who had started the fight said, "Who put you in charge of us? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard that, realizing that the word was out, he ran for his life and lived in exile over in Midian. During the years of exile, 2 sons were born to him there. So 40 years later, in the wilderness of Mount Sinai, an angel appeared to him in the guise of flames of a burning bush. Moses, not believing his eyes, went up to take a closer look. He heard God's voice, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the fathers. Frightened nearly out of his skin, Moses shut his eyes and turned away. And God said, "Kneel, pray. You are in a holy place, on holy ground. I've seen the agony of my people in Egypt. I've heard their groans. I've come to help them. So get yourself ready. I'm sending you back to Egypt to help them." This is the same Moses whom they earlier rejected, saying, "Who put you in charge of us?" This is the Moses that God, using the angel flaming in the burning bush, sent back as ruler and redeemer. He led them out of slavery. He did wonderful things, setting up God's signs all through Egypt, down at the Red Sea, and out in the wilderness for 40 years. This is the Moses who said to his congregation, "God will raise up a prophet just like me from your descendants." This is the Moses who stood between the angel speaking at Sinai and your fathers, assembled us in the wilderness and took the life-giving words given to him and handed them over to us, words our fathers would have nothing to do with. They craved the old Egyptian ways, whining to Aaron, "Make us gods we can see and follow." This Moses who got us out of here miles from nowhere, who knows what's happened to him? That was the time when they made a calf idol, brought sacrifices to it, and congratulated each other on the wonderful religious program they had put together. Religious program. Sacrifices. God wasn't at all pleased, but he let them do it their way, worship every new god that came down the pike, and live with the consequences described by the prophet Amos. "Did you bring me offerings of animals and grains those 40 wilderness years, O Israel? Hardly. You were too busy building shrines to war gods, to sex goddesses, worshiping them with all your might. That's why I put you in exile in Babylon." And all this time, our ancestors had a tent shrine for true worship, a temple made to the exact specifications God provided Moses. They had it with them as they followed Joshua when God cleared the land of pagans, and still had it right down to the time of David. David asked God for a permanent place for worship, but Solomon built it. Yet that doesn't mean that Most High God lives in a building made by carpenters and masons, a work that their hands had made. The prophet Isaiah put it well when he wrote, "Heaven is my throne room. I rest my feet on earth. So what kind of house will you build me? Says God. Where can I get away and relax? It's already built, and I built it. Heaven, I guess. And you, Stephen speaking directly to the religious leaders now, and you continue so bull-headed, calluses on your hearts, flaps on your ears, deliberately ignoring the Holy Spirit, just like your ancestors. Was there ever a prophet who didn't get the same treatment? Your ancestors killed anyone who dared talk about the coming of the Just One, and you've kept up the family tradition. Traitors and murderers, all of you. You had God's law handed to you by angels, gift wrapped, and you squandered it. Little distraction there. At that point, they went wild, a rioting mob of catcalls and whistles and invective from these high priests. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, hardly noticed. He only had eyes for God, whom he saw in all his glory with Jesus standing at his side. And he said, Oh, I see heaven open wide, and the Son of Man standing at God's side. Yelling and hissing, the mob drowned him out. Now, in full stampede, they dragged him out of town and pelted him with rocks. The ringleaders took off their coats and asked a young man named Saul to watch them. As the rocks rained down, Stephen prayed, Master Jesus, take my life. And then he knelt down, praying loud enough for everyone to hear. Master, don't blame them for this sin. His last words. And then he died. Saul was right there, congratulating the killers. And that's the end of the chapter. Now, I guess a bit of commentary. Saul, a young man named Saul, watched their coats. Saul was right there congratulating the killers. My pastor was saying how when you get people, when you hand your coats to someone to watch them and watch what you're doing, and they're standing there approving, congratulating, that this is not somebody that they don't see this kind of role as like a lesser person, a student or a servant with a bunch of high priests. This is somebody who is standing over in authority for them. He's the one who has the authority, the responsibility of being able to watch their coats, I guess, and approving of what they're doing. And so this Saul is somebody that would be my pastor was saying that this Saul was basically somebody who'd be well respected, somebody who's higher up in the ranks, which that could be the case. And if you're wondering who this Saul guy is, you might be more familiar with his name given later on, Paul, with a P for Papa. It's Paul, who ends up writing the majority of the New Testament after the Gospels, and especially after Acts. He's known for writing the letters. He's known for writing probably the earliest pieces of the New Testament, the earliest letters. So Paul is a founding member of the Christianity movement altogether. And this is his introduction right here, where the author of Luke and Acts mentions him for the first time as someone present when Stephen is stoned. Stephen, the first martyr, the poor guy. I mean, he was described earlier as somebody who got into arguments and but brimming with God's grace and energy, was doing wonderful things amongst the people, unmistakable signs. This is in chapter 6 here. People would go up against him trying to argue him down, but they were no match for his wisdom and spirit when he spoke. So people would get into arguments with Stephen, I suppose. Stephen wasn't necessarily known for starting arguments. And note that in chapter 6, these people that are arguing with him are men from the meeting place. So that could be the main temple in Jerusalem. But this meeting place had a membership made up of freed slaves, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, people from Cilicia and Asia. So these are other Hellenists, other Greek-speaking people, probably Greek-speaking Jews or Greeks that have converted to Judaism, or people from these other nations that speak Greek, also happen to speak Greek as part of the Roman Empire, who converted to Judaism. And so this could be a meeting place within Jerusalem, or perhaps nearby or something, where that's not the main temple. But these are the ones arguing with him. And in chapter 6, it describes them as going in secret, bribing men to lie, saying that they heard Stephen cursing Moses and God. And so when Stephen is recounting almost the entirety of the Old Testament here in one chapter and going over details of Abraham, Moses, God, he is defending his position on Moses, on God, where he is showing how much he believes in God. He believes in Moses, he believes in Abraham, but he is also retelling the story to show how Moses had people that argued against him, that Moses' sons, the fathers of Israel, including Jacob and Joseph, that they had people, some of their brothers turned on Joseph. And Moses's attempt to try and help the people of Israel, to save the people of Israel, was at the onset. He was rejected by the same people, and so not Joseph, Stephen is trying to illustrate how Jesus is like Joseph. Jesus is like Moses, where they are rejected by their fellow man, their fellow Israelites, as they're trying to help them. And so Jesus rejected by the Israelites, and now Stephen himself rejected by the fellow Israelites. It's like, hey, I am not arguing that that our forefathers are wrong, that God is and cursing God and denying our faith. I am a member of your own people. His first words are about being how friends, fathers, and brothers, the God of glory appeared to our father Abraham. He is saying he is among them. He is one of you. He's one of your own people. But then at the end, he does get a pretty argumentative when he says, was there ever a prophet who didn't get that same kind of rejection treatment? Your ancestors, speaking to the high priests and religious leaders, your ancestors killed anyone who dared talk about the coming of the just one. This servant of God, this son of God who wants to help you, help save you, this Jesus. And you've kept up the family tradition. Traitors and murderers, all of you. You had God's law handed to you by angels, gift wrapped, and you squandered it. So, yeah. He makes a lot of progress as far as showing where he stands and defending his stance on the traditions of the people here, and on his belief in God and the belief in God's help and prophets and preaching and all these things. But the folks he's arguing against won't have any of it, and so at near the end he just kind of tears into them. Maybe he could tell that they just weren't getting it and figured and just got frustrated with them. Or maybe he was trying to illustrate the difference between him and the Christian movement and them, the followers of the law, the old guard, as it were, not accepting the new thing, and being stuck in the old ways, squandering it, and then that happens. Yeah. I also just noted how the end of chapter 6, when Stephen is kind of introduced to the Holy Council, They looked at him, they found they couldn't take their eyes off him. His face was like the face of an angel. So it's like this guy was a looker. And then there's another mention of somebody being good looking where it's actually Moses when he was a baby. And such, just such a time, Moses was born, a most beautiful baby. So take that for what it's worth. Also note the way that Joseph describes the establishing of the God's law, but then there's the calf idol, where the people wanted something else. They wanted something their hands had made, something to bring sacrifices to, and develop religious programs and put programs together. And this is I personally see this as what the Israelites have done at this point with the temple itself, where the temple is being treated with a certain kind of idolatry, and the sacrifices there like seen as the same kind of sacrifices that were given to the golden calf. And how it's like they develop a program, they develop a law, a religious relationship with God that has rules and regulations and practices that can be done without having your heart in it, which I will caution and like temper my own words here with saying that like that doesn't mean that the Israelites in that day were all going to the temple and making sacrifices and not having their heart in it and not having any relationship with God. I don't think that's it as at all. It's just that Stephen believes in this new thing and doesn't want to be constrained by the religious leaders, their programs of religion, their sacrifices, their temple. Nowhere in the New Testament, especially Acts forward, does it talk about these Jewish people that are following Jesus making sacrifices in the way that the Old Testament prescribes it. They're not making animal sacrifices. They're making sacrifices of resources and finances for sure, as they sell fields and give money. They help feed the poor and that kind of thing. And that seems to be like the new program that they're developing. And they want to keep doing this new thing. They don't want to be kept in a box that the temple worshippers are trying to keep everyone in. But when I say temple worshippers, once again, got to temper that, where it's like the Christians of this day are still very much meeting at the temple. They're meeting at the meeting place, the synagogues, and talking to the other Jews. These are Jewish people within the Jewish community. They're arguing with other Jews because they're members of the Jewish community and they're having these differences of opinion. And so, yeah, religious arguments, which tends to be a common thread in religions. Anyway, I will leave it at that, and just say bless you and bless the Jewish people, bless the Christians, bless the non-Jewish and non-Christian people, and yeah.